Hello, and welcome to the Newbery Report, where grown women read children's books and argue about them. And today on the podcast, we're talking about Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry by Mildred D. Taylor. Hello, and welcome to the Newbery Report. I'm Kerry Caston. With me, as always, is Carolyn Burns. Hello, Carolyn.
Hi, Kerry.
Good to see you.
Good to see you as always.
I wish the audience could see you, but they can't. Someday. And we have a special guest today, Ashley Wilson. Yay!
Hello.
You can clap for yourself, too, if you want. Great. You seem less excited about you than we are excited about you.
I'm okay with me. I'm cool.
You get to hang out with you all.
I do.
So we'll start, as we always do, with a brief summary in case it's been years since you read it, either in school or of your own volition at an appropriate age, although any age is appropriate for reading. Am I right?
Totally right.
Totally right.
Don't just nod, Carolyn. They need to hear your voice.
I'm reading the back of this book and it says ages 10 and up. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, it does, like a game or something.
Yeah.
Monopoly and Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. Ages 10 and up. Okay, great. So, Carolyn, you want to treat us to a reading of the back of the book?
Sure. Well, Kerry, you and I have the same edition, and our back of the book is quite short. Humiliation and fear seem to rule the lives of Cassie Logan and her family, but they have one thing that no one can take away: their land. And with that to hold them together, nothing can tear them apart.
Ashley, you have a different book.
I do. I have a different edition, but it actually has one of the same quotes from yours. And it starts with the land to hold them together, nothing can tear the Logans apart. Why is the land so important to Cassie's family? It takes the events of one turbulent year. The year of the night riders and the burnings. The year a white girl humiliates Cassie in public simply because she is black, to show Cassie that having a place of her own is the Logan family's lifeblood. It is the land that gives the Logans their courage and pride. No matter how others may degrade them, the Logans possess something no one can take away. And I thought it was interesting, too, the New York Times book review on the back says, Taylor writes not with rancor or bitterness of indignities, but with pride, strength, and respect for humanity.
What do you like about that?
I like it because I feel the same way. I believe that the content in this book, the things that are covered, could be very easy to write about in a bitter or hateful or angry way. And I think she really does a good job at explaining things in a seemingly kind of objective way, in a loving way. So
Cool. So what we usually start off with, Ashley, as our listeners at home know, is whether we liked it or not, because everything that we're going to say about the book is inherently going to be influenced by whether we liked it or not. So, Carolyn, did you like it?
No. Brains are blown. I felt very ambivalent about it. Nothing really struck me very, very strongly with this, and nothing really left that strong of an impression. And I'm interested to hear why everyone else enjoyed it so much.
You don't know what we think.
That's true. I'm interested to know if other people enjoyed it or not.
Great. Well, Ashley, Carolyn is interested to know, did you like it or not?
it's one of my favorite books.
Aww.
This is my third time reading it, and I would love to read it more.
I also liked it. I found it so interesting, the bit about the land. The land was in Ashley, in your back of the book, but not in what Carolyn and I read. And for fun, I'm just going to jump to that last line of the book.
Spoilers.
Where she says, I cried for TJ and the land. So, like, there is the ground, the land, it's like this very strong presence that I, as someone that, like, lives in a city and on the 7th floor and takes elevators, the ground isn't something I think about, and, like, mud was, like, very visceral for me. I don't know if you guys... Ashley, you're nodding. I feel like you want to say something about mud.
Well, I feel like the land is almost like a character in and of itself in this book. I mean, like, but also, furthermore, like, nature actually plays a role. Like, on the first day of school, it's beautiful out, and it makes it even more miserable that they have to go to school. They'd love to be running barefoot through the forest and the cool green trails, and it sounds picturesque. And then, other parts in the book, there's a horrible, like, lightning storm, that really punctuates, like, thunder and lightning that punctuates so many parts in this book. even leading up to that part, like the sky took on a strange yellowish tint, things like that. And I think that throughout the book, constantly, the land is that kind of like the unifying thing that
like we
pulls it all together.
Live on this land together, and ultimately it's the land that brings everybody together at the end. And yet everything is so stuck. I couldn't get over. I forget where it was that I wrote this, but like I literally wrote "stuck in the mud," and it just like on chapter 4, like first page of chapter 4, I was like, "That's where we are. We're stuck in this like dirty nastiness of like humanity. Ugh, how do we get out of this?" And like you can't, as you were mentioning before, actually, like the weather, like it's constantly either too dry or too wet, and there's like no happy medium, and they're only happy ostensibly like when they're picking cotton, but it's really just because they have agency in those times. It's not because they like they enjoy working together and being with their family. But like I found it overwhelming. You didn't feel any of that?
I did, and I don't know if it's too early to deviate from the text itself and sort of go into the historical connotations. But the book is written in.
It's never too early.
The book is set in the 30s. Which is sort of the time of these like Jim Crow laws and the segregation and sort of freedom still being a newer thing. But it's written in the time of like the Black Power movement, the Civil Rights movement, and from an author who was very prevalent in the Civil Rights movement. And I think that can't be
pushed aside
or
disregarded. No, I think that's important. I think I'm jumping on what you're talking about, but let me know if I'm not. It occurred to me while I was reading this book, like at what point, is there a kid somewhere in America that sits in a classroom the first day they talk about slavery and goes, "We did what?" Like, is it a shock to anyone ever? Because that's not how I remember my history classes ever being. Like, and I was like, but the idea of slavery is like almost incomprehensible, like that it felt appropriate at any point for any person to do that to any other person. And you would think, I imagine, I don't know, you can tell me if your classes were different, like shouldn't have there been a kid that like raised their hand and was like, but why? It's just mind-blowing. And so I was thinking like, well, I don't know, maybe it's because I was raised Catholic and so you learn about the Israelites being enslaved by the Egyptians, like, when you're 3 and 4 and like that's just like part of the history. So it's not that surprising that humanity did that later on, I guess, maybe. But no, it's like awful. So I liked that this book in particular, like it's at a time where, there's no Wikipedia, obviously. There's no, like, the information is hardly readily available. Mildred Taylor says, like, in her author's note, it's almost all oral. Like, it's almost all stories, and the stories die with the person that tells them, except to the extent that anyone remembers them enough. But they're a different story when someone else is telling them, right? So it's like there's that scene where Mama is explaining to Cassie, like, what it means in this town, in this time, for her to be black. And for Lily and Jean to be white. And for Lily and Jean's family to be white. And it's like, she explains to her the history of slavery in a way that suggests that now at 9, she didn't really know it. Or at least she didn't know the ramifications of socially and economically. Which, like, I hear you. Like, why should a 9-year-old need to know social and economic ramifications?
According to this book, she shouldn't even be reading this yet. She shouldn't know it yet. Yeah. This is 10 and over only.
Yeah, which, like, we can talk about how this book says that, like, how age is different. Like, at 13, he's basically a man. Like, he, at 12, went down to Louisiana by himself, the older brother, and came back. What? Like, you have to have a flight attendant sit with you if you're under 10,
Yeah. You're not even allowed to stay home alone, technically. I think it's illegal.
Yeah. Depending on the state, but yeah. So, I don't know. I felt a lot, and I'm just curious if anyone felt equally impacted.
I did feel impacted, and I think that this story is very strong and has a really good grasp on the time frame that it is depicted in and in the time frame that it was written in.
Yeah.
But for me personally, it felt like it was just leaning on this hot button issue and on the topic of slavery and of inequality and of segregation and all of these issues that needed to be talked about at the time and still need to be talked about today. But I personally felt that it did it at the detriment of plot and character structure and really flushing out these people as full human beings. And it felt to me so one note at times that I was like, I get it. which is an awful thing to be thinking when you're reading things that are, have such hefty weight to them. But I wanted more character development.
Kind of heavy-handed, maybe.
Yeah, heavy-handed.
Yes.
For me, I guess I read something about Black History Month, and somebody stated that one of the biggest travesties of Black History Month is that we actually don't study slavery. The things kids learn during Black History Month are not slavery. They learn about, prominent Black people, which is wonderful. They should. But slavery is a huge part of the American Black experience. And it's still, to this day, we are, seeing effects of that. And so I think this book is very valuable because it really paints a picture of things that truly happened. And they're very small examples. I mean, a burning, threatening to get lynched. Somebody got tarred and feathered. But these things happened not just a few times, but like so often. And it's like, all that a Black man would have to do was to be accused of like coming on to a white woman, and this could have been his fate. And I think like the fact that somebody like a 6-year-old little man is terrified of getting burned is so shocking and insane, and it lets you know how warm and safe we feel every night in our beds. And the fact that these kids, a whole generation of people grew up in the South, and that's what their day-to-day life was like. School buses running the kids off the road. That's insane. Like an adult man, with a car threatening young children. I don't know. I guess I just feel like maybe it is a little heavy-handed, but considering the subject matter and considering how lightly it's covered in our grade schools and elementary schools, I think it's incredibly important that children read this book and understand some of the gravity that actually was attached to these night riders and slavery, and that slavery didn't just end and it wasn't just over.
What I liked about it is that, Carolyn, we've talked about this before about like sometimes books are in, point of view, right? Sometimes they're in first person, sometimes they're in second person, third person, whatever. Well, rarely are they in second unless it's a choose your own adventure. But anyway, like because we were I right away, I was just like, I'll be honest, because I was I right away and because I read the author's note, which made me think a lot of Sounder. Again, I hate to compare it to Sounder, but it sort of like begs for the comparison. And Sounder starts with an author's note. Have you read Sounder, Ashley?
I haven't.
Okay, it's okay.
Just listen to our podcast.
Yes,
I will.
Go back to listen. You'll get everything that's important.
All the spoilers.
And so I sort of felt the author's note in Sounder is sort of used as a scapegoat for why he as a white man feels comfortable telling the story of a Black sharecropping family. And so I did Google, as soon as I saw there was an author's note, I Googled Mildred Taylor because I honestly didn't know anything about her. And I was like, okay. I hate to say I breathed a sigh of relief that she was Black, but I was like, okay, so it's not going to be an excuse, this author's note. Great. And then it was about her father, and it was sort of sweet, because the dedication is to her father. Mm-hmm. She talks about, from my father, the storyteller, I learned to respect the past, to respect my own heritage and myself. And I was like, great, this is what storytelling is about. This is why we have books. And then she gets to the last paragraph. My father died last week. And I was like, oh, okay. And so, like, that's where I am. And I, turn to the first page. And we are I, right? And we are us, and so like, I was in it. I was in it right away, and I don't know how fair that is, but I'm also not 10, So like, and I know what slavery is, and I have a poor concept, but a concept of how horrible it is, right? And I have like some sense of tragedy, and so I don't know. For me, that put me right back with the character. So we get right? We get to the white people are treating Black people real bad, right? Like right away with the buses and everything. And then we get to this, we see the scene in Strawberry. So Cassie finally gets to go with Big Mama to the big town of Strawberry, which has my favorite description. Strawberry was nothing like the tough, sprawling bigness I had envisioned. It was instead a sad red place. I'm so glad it's red because it's called Strawberry.
Strawberries are red.
But she gets to go with Big Mama, with her grandmother, to the market to sell the extra food that they have, and whatever they're selling, produce and things. And we sort of think, like Cassie, oh, they don't get to go with her because they're not old enough, or they're not, this is a luxury, or this is a big kid thing. And then we find out very quickly that it's because they don't want Cassie and the children to understand this dynamic of how white people treat black people, and they don't want them to be part of it, and they're protecting them. And so it becomes so much more painful of like, oh, she didn't want you to come, she didn't want you to see this, and she didn't want you to be part of this, and they all wanted you to like believe good things about yourself, as any parent does. And so Cassie gets really pissed, right? When so she has that interaction with Lily and Jean, where she runs into her, and Lily and Jean is like, you have to apologize. You walk on the street, don't walk on the sidewalk. And the father of Lily and Jean comes and like also starts to sort of verbally and then physically assault Cassie. And Big Mama comes and forces her to apologize. And Cassie is pissed and is so mad at Big Mama for it. We have this whole conversation. We go back home, and Uncle Hammer is there. And despite all of Big Mama's like attempts to thwart it, Cassie tells the whole story to Uncle Hammer, and he storms out, and Mama gets pissed, rightfully so, at Cassie. Mama says, Stacy tells me you blame Big Mama for what happened today. Is that right? And Cassie, I thought over her question and answered, not for all of it, just for making me apologize to that old dumb Lily and Jean Sims. She oughtn't have done that, Mama. Papa wouldn't have. And Mama says back, I don't want to hear what Papa would have done, Mama snapped, or what Mr. Morrison would have done, or Uncle Hammer. You were with Big Mama, and she did what she had to do. And so all of a sudden it's like, oh, God, it's not just race, it's also gender. Like, this is awful. Like, not only is there a discrepancy between her and the white people in her neighborhood, but also her and male figures. And it's just like, it just keeps getting worse. And I thought this book did it, where it may have been heavy-handed with race, I thought was interestingly subtle about gender.
Going back to like just the Mama talking to Cassie after the strawberry incident, I think that's like for me, it's a powerful point in the book, because growing up, I always realized I was a different color than other people. Actually, it came at a certain age. Like I didn't really notice it until I was about 5. And so it was kind of shocking for me. I remember when I read this when I was 12 years old, and it was very shocking for her not to realize that being black and being white, that there was a difference, or, that she had a different place because of the color of her skin, because I feel like I grew up acutely aware of that. But I encountered racism in first grade, like at the Catholic school that I went to. So I guess it was very shocking to me, because, the fact that she's like, that Mama's trying to explain to Cassie that Mr. Sims thinks that Lily and Jean is better than Stacy or Christopher John or Little Man or Cassie for that matter. And Cassie doesn't understand. She thinks, oh, because it's his daughter. And Mom has to go, no, because she's white. And Cassie's next words are, aw, shoot, white ain't nothing. And that's just like, it's kind of heartbreaking as an adult to witness this moment of this 9-year-old little girl really starting to understand what's at stake here and how it's going to work for her for the rest of her life.
We have to take a quick pause. We'll be right back.
This episode of the Newbery Report is sponsored by Payfully. Renting your home or spare room can be a great way to earn some extra income, but actually getting paid can take months. That's where Payfully comes in. Payfully is a safe and secure way to get paid for your upcoming reservations within 24 hours of them being booked. Payfully deposits directly into your bank account with funds usually available the same day. It works with all the major platforms, Airbnb, VRBO, HomeAway, and others, and they've helped thousands of hosts expand their business or cover unexpected expenses. Visit payfully.co, that's payfully.co, for $20 off your first request with code Newbery. That's payfully.co, promo code Newbery, Newbery.
Hello, listeners. Are you a business owner? Your next customer might be listening right now, just like you are. You can let them know who you are by sponsoring this show. just email us at hello@citizenracecar.com. That's HELLO@citizenracecar.com. And now back to our conversation about Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry.
So I found through some external resources that a lot of people consider this to be a coming-of-age story. And I have to disagree. And the reason behind that is that I don't think that this is a story of Cassie's coming of age. I think it's a story of her finding some stuff out and sort of learning a little bit about like how things like, quote, are, or like the way things work. But she's the only one in her family that doesn't seem to like really get like the larger implications of this. And the whole family, from start to finish, you sort of get this idea that like they are very like passive and they are doing these acts of civil disobedience, like doing the boycott on the store and when Mama puts the covers on the books, which she's not supposed to, things like that. And everyone is very like passive and trying to just be good people. And she's the only one that takes the violent approach of the Black family.
Well, her and Uncle Hammer.
You're right. Correct.
I have it recorded now that I'm right.
But I thought it was interesting, you know, she's learning all these lessons as she goes, and maybe it's just because like there is a little bit of a learning curve and there is so much anger coming from being the one that's disillusioned, but she specifically goes off into the woods with Lily and Jean and has this violent altercation with her and comes back from it just being like, yep, like, I win, I'm better than you, like, haha, I figured it out. And it's directly opposite of what her family is trying to teach her.
But I actually feel like that's not true as far as what her family is trying to teach her, because her father has a beautiful part where he teaches her that, you know, she's not going to be the last white person that treats you like this. And there's going to be many more. But basically, you have to pick and choose your battles. Mm-hmm. And if this is going to eat away at you for the rest of your life, then you need to take it. But be careful and pick and choose wisely. And I think that was the whole thing. I mean, she used her brains to get Lily and Jean into a place where Lily and Jean really couldn't fight back. She let Lily and Jean confide in her. She carried her books. She kissed up to her and, you know, really like made Lily and Jean, you know, depend on Cassie. And then Lily and Jean trusted her enough to be let off the path, and Cassie took her moment. But I think also later on in the novel, you know, something else happens and Hammer, you know, does something with his car that, you know, causes Mama to say, you know, all the kids laugh and everything's great, but Mama says that will cost us one day. And I think that's the balance, is like that. What Cassie did very well could have cost her and her family her life. Lily and Jean still could have told, and it was extremely dangerous. And I think part of it is what's really interesting about this book is I think it presents that point of view as like, I wouldn't have put up with that. I would have fought back. I would have said no. I wouldn't have stepped down off that sidewalk. I would have told those people like that it's not right to treat people like this. But where would that have gotten you? It would have gotten you and your family killed. It would have made you lose your land. It would have made, you know.
And also, like, for what? Why did you do this in the larger scheme of things? But also, there's a wonderful moment at the end of that passage, right? But right after, so Cassie lures Lily and Jean into the forest and has this opportunity when no one's there and no one watches her to beat her up because she is prepared for this, and that's sort of what her idea was. And at the end, Lily and Jean goes like, why, Cassie? Why did you do this? You were such a nice little girl. And there's a passage in the book, and it's from Cassie's point of view, and she says, I stared at her astonished. Then I turned and left the forest, not wanting to believe that Lily and Jean didn't even realize it had all been just a game. Like, she didn't get the fact, because she had been, like, following her around, carrying her books from her, like, inherently, like, earning her trust, getting her blackmail, like, topics down so that she had something to use against her. And then at the end, like, she didn't even understand. Like, Lily and Jean didn't even understand. And it's just so heartbreaking. You're like, you did all of that for all of this. And in the end, like, your point isn't even being made, other than the fact that, like, yeah, you got to slap her around a little bit and that sure feels good. But, like, now what? She's going to go off and be like, that black girl hit me for no good reason, and not understanding that, like, no, it was retribution for what you had done to her.
But at the same time, I don't think Cassie beating up Lily and Jean had anything to do with teaching Lily and Jean a lesson, as much as it felt good to Cassie to be vindicated.
Yeah.
And it would have eaten away at her, and that would have made her bitter and angry and only probably snowballed into something worse later on. It feels like almost that's what happened to Hammer, right? Like he just kept getting more angry with every time and now he can't even live down there.
What do you think he does?
Hammer?
He's got a man's job.
Yeah, man's job.
It makes him lots of money in the city,
Yeah.
in the big city.
This may be a product of like where we are now, but as soon as I heard that he like had no family and no wife, I was like, he's gay, right? He's gay, doing gay stuff in Chicago.
It's where all of his pent-up anger comes from.
I hate to bring up things out of order because I know our fans are so attached to the order, but I keep wanting to bring up the things that I underlined as our illusion of life or our metaphor or parable for the way that life is or works, either in the books or in life that we know, and because it's intrinsically tied to the lessons that that Cassie learns, I think, in the book. So I had 2.5.
It's too many, Kerry.
It's too many.
A 45-minute podcast.
Too many illusions. But they're sort of all in the same theme. Like I could not escape this one theme, and it's restated a couple of times. So I'll just go through them quickly, and then you guys can show me what you thought. The first one is from the incident at Strawberry, as we are now pseudo-affectionately referring to it. Right after the incident at the store, where she asked the storekeeper to stop letting other people in front of them and to just fill their order like they asked. And Stacy pulls Cassie out of the store, and Cassie is pissed. And she's like, "This makes no sense. Why are we all why are we okay with this?" Which I feel like is the whole theme of the book. Like, why are we okay with this? Cassie says to Stacy, "What's the matter with you? You know he was wrong." And Stacy swallowed to flush his anger, and then said gruffly, "I know it, and you know it, but he don't know it, and that's where the trouble is." And I was like, "Whoa, that is so succinctly the reason we have any problems at all." I just think it's beautiful. I have another one, but I want to leave you space.
It's in the latter part of the book, but Stacy's mad at Mr. Lanier and Mr. Avery because they said that they're not going to shop in Vicksburg anymore because they can't, because they've been basically threatened. And Stacy makes a comment about them being scared as jackrabbits and kind of puffs up his chest and said, "Well, I wouldn't do that. That's not what I would do. I would do this." And his papa teaches him a lesson. And then he ends up talking about how basically like how they're like the land. And I think that was like really beautiful to me. It was "You see that fig tree over yonder, Cassie? Them other trees all around? That oak and walnut? They're a lot bigger, and they take up more room and give so much shade they almost overshadow that little old fig. But that fig tree's got roots that run deep, and it belongs in that yard as much as that oak and that walnut. It keeps on blooming, bearing good fruit year after year, knowing all the time it'll never get as big as them other trees. Just keeps on growing and doing what it gotta do. It don't give up. It give up, it'll die. There's a lesson to be learned from that little tree, Cassie girl, 'cause we're like it. We keep doing what we gotta, and we don't give up. We can't."
That was my illusion as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
High five.
I mean, to be fair, it literally says there's a lesson to be learned from that little tree. But yeah. It very succinctly sort of ties it all together. I think so.
The other one I had that is sort of along the same theme as what Stacy was saying, and this is a section you were alluding to earlier, Ashley, about the father telling Cassie that, if something's going to eat away at you, you got to handle it in the way that you need to handle it. And what he says to her is, there are things you can't back down on, things you got to take a stand on, but it's up to you to decide what them things are. How you carry yourself, what you stand for, that's how you gain respect. But little one, ain't nobody's respect worth more than your own. And I was like, but how does that work in the world that you are in? And you can't even do that, really. And so, because of the lessons that are being taught to Cassie, and I think this is part of the reason that people probably assert that it's a coming-of-age story, although I also have to agree with you, Carolyn, I don't want this to be a coming-of-age story because that suggests that this is a world that she has to learn about. And, of course, I don't want that to be true.
But I almost think of it more as a growing up story. I guess I feel like a coming of age story is like kind of it's a small like it's more about like that point where you pass from being a child into a semi-adult, right? But I guess I feel like they're still kids at the end of this book. I mean,
She doesn't get her period.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly.
That we know of.
But, I mean, she certainly knows more things about the world and understands the way things work in a totally different way than she does at the beginning of the book, which, yeah, like starting out with the books and ending with crying for TJ. That's a big growth spurt.
Then I found this thing was probably my favorite line in the whole book. And it's near the end when the Wallace and the Sims have gone to the Avery's house and they're trying to find TJ after the whole strawberry incident too, the second strawberry incident. And they're pulling Claude out and Christopher John is like so upset. And this is beyond anything that they could have expected, despite that they've seen a man nearly burned alive, that they've heard about lynching, that they know they think they know and feel like they know all of the possible bad things, like actually watching it happen and understanding that someone believes a certain thing and watching them act on that belief are like two utterly different experiences. And now here they are watching people execute their beliefs. And Stacy says, we gotta get help, because they've been hiding in the forest because they've just dropped TJ off into what apparently was a trap, which is also interesting because they thought TJ was trying to trap them, and it turns out that they actually led TJ right back into a trap that had been set for TJ. And Stacy says, we got to get help, but none of us could move. I watched the world from outside myself, and I was just like, yeah, I watched the world from outside myself. Like, that's beautiful and so true, and so what I feel like when I don't understand what's happening around me is like I can't be here then. Like, if this utterly incongruous action or activity is like taking place, I must not be here, and I can't emotionally be here. So that was my other illusion of life, but it's a little more negative.
I think Mildred Taylor has a beautiful gift for language.
Yeah.
Is something I felt throughout the book.
But you want to talk about TJ?
I always want to talk about TJ.
Yeah. Oh, boy. What a journey with that guy.
There's a lot to unpack with that character. He sort of is their foil for a lot of the novel. And towards the end of the novel, you start to see him more as the victim, and you're kind of being set up for this ending where you're supposed to feel for him, because the first 75% of the book, everyone just hates TJ. You sort of are set up to dislike him inherently because he's a bad guy. He gets their mother fired. He gets...
and doesn't even remember it because he was, I guess, blackout drunk when it happened or whatever.
Does he not remember it, or is he lying?
Yeah, I don't know.
Later on in the book, he confesses it too. So he remembers it. I think he didn't want to,
he got Stacy in trouble for cheating on a test when it was him. He got his mother fired purposely. He's set up as this like awful guy that really only has himself in mind, and he doesn't really have this empathy that the family really strongly teaches to their children, and you can see how much it bothers them. And to compare him to Jeremy, my second favorite character of the book, who's this little white boy that all he wants to do is be friends with his family, and they can't do it. They're like, no, you're white, we're black. Like, I think it's easy to think of this sort of story as like a story about racism, but I think that the character of Jeremy really pulls in the fact that like racism is a two-way street, and the family sits down, and the father sits down with the kids and says, Jeremy might be a great kid, but at the end of the day, it's really not the appropriate time to be a friend.
Well, and there's a power dynamic that's implicit in the way that their society works that makes them always want to question where he's coming from, which is interesting because they seem to trust Mr. Jameson, but I imagine that's because there's a financial relationship. They pay him to be the lawyer.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, I have stuff to say about Charlie Sims, though. Jeremy Sims, sorry, not Charlie Sims.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things I remember being very struck with the first time I read this book was the distrust that Black people might feel towards whites. And it's shocking in a way. In this day and age, it's shocking, to think that like, oh, people are not going to trust somebody else based on the color of their skin. But, the United States did that for a very long time, right? And I guess I felt like this book kind of made you understand why someone might feel a bit skeptical of kindness being given to them. Like a black person might feel skeptical of kindness being given to them from a white person. Now, here's the thing. I think the Logan children like Jeremy much more than they like TJ. They allow him to hang out with them. He can just lay and be quiet and enjoy nature with them.
And Stacey says he might be a better friend to me than TJ ever could.
Yes, exactly. But I think that the thing is like, yeah, Jeremy did speak up, and he's shown himself to try to be a very good friend. But what effect does he have on his father when his father is raging? Nothing. I mean, his father does not regard him. And in fact, Jeremy even talks about how he sleeps in a tree house at night, which sounds like he probably doesn't have the best relationship with his family. Sounds like he's a little different than them. He's kind of like the black sheep of their family. And but I still think, even as lonely and as sad as his figure is, I mean, the Logan kids are giving him some sort of gift because he wouldn't keep coming around them. I mean, they must give him some sort of friendship that's, they still walk with him, and every day he's meeting up with them along that road. So I don't know. I guess it would be nice if the parents didn't exist and it was just a bunch of kids having fun together and being able to play, but it's not. It's like it's his father that's the problem. It's his older brothers. It's
right.
Yeah.
I almost wonder if it's they sort of sense too that it would be bad for him to hang out with them. Like, they sort of get it's not going to go well for Jeremy.
He would be ostracized even more by his family, which obviously he already has a contentious relationship with.
It almost seems to me like it's like kindness through omission, though. Like, they never really are outwardly kind to him and let him come over and play and ask him about his day, or like really sort of try to facilitate this relationship. But they have, like you said, they are kind to him. They let him sort of walk with them. They were okay when he came over to the house, and they accepted the present that he gave them.
But it comes from a place of fear. And it's not just like I don't really care about you. It goes deeper than that. It's like what it will be the repercussions if Charlie Sims comes over and sees Jeremy. He can't find Jeremy. He comes over and finds out he's hanging out at the Logan's house. He's playing with those kids in the woods. I mean, not only, I'm sure he would have gotten whooped, within an inch of his life for that kind of behavior. His dad seems like,
should we talk about child abuse too?
Corporal punishment
is all over this book.
Yeah.
That in and of itself feels like an interesting time capsule of like child rearing.
Well, directly from the parents, like child abuse, or the fact that they were going to lynch TJ, who I think they say is 16.
Yeah. I mean, that's...
Well, he's 14 at the start of 14.
Is he 14?
Or 13 or 14, because he failed the class 1 year. So he's a year. He's supposed to be a year ahead. So Stacey is 12 at the beginning of the book. So TJ must be 13. I think he's 14 at the end of the book.
Yeah, I thought that it's something like that. Yeah, but good golly.
Yeah.
When I read this book to the 10-year-old I babysit for, I kind of made a disclaimer, and I was like, this book is about a lot of difficult things that Black people went through in the South in the 1930s. But keep in mind that Mildred Taylor always keeps the Logan family safe. So no matter what's going to happen, they're going to make it through. And I feel like just knowing that is such a relief, because I feel like this book, there's so many moments that are so frightening and scary and just have you on the edge of your seat. And I wanted to know, who's your favorite character? Because you said Jeremy was your second favorite.
Good memory.
And because I have a favorite too. I have a couple favorites.
But I responded much more heavily to like him and TJ than I did to the family. Cassie in particular, I get that she's the narrator, but she also, the narration style of Cassie felt so much more like omniscient than I thought that the book had a right to. Like, she kept overhearing all of these conversations that I don't think a child would ever overhear. It bugged me a little bit.
and the recounting of the stories started to take on a life of their own, where it was actually happening right in front of you, like when TJ's recounting what happened at the Mercantile or whatever.
Yeah.
Yes. I felt like she was given the narrator status because it was written for children, but I don't think it was done in the best possible way.
Yeah.
What? Who's your favorite character?
I love Christopher John. I feel like he's my little spirit animal. Like, I'm like, yes, I want to stay at home in warm
And
bed.
he finally does
like,
it at the end.
Yeah, and he's like, I'm not, he doesn't want to be left behind. And like, like half the time, like when he sees Uncle Hammer coming down the road, like everybody goes running toward Uncle Hammer, but Christopher John carries his plate in his hand. He keeps his plate with him. Like, I love this little boy. Like,
He hates to miss lunch.
Yes, and he doesn't like to be left out, but like at the same time, he's just like, guys, they told us to stay here. Let's stay here. So I feel like he's like my little safe spirit animal, and I love him so much. And then I felt bad for him at the end when he does get left out to look at the fields, because honestly, it teaches you kind of, even though you might want to stay home, it's sometimes better to go along for the ride and just go for the adventure, even though you might be a little scared.
Yeah.
So I would like to give this book 2 chignons, because I had to look that word up. I didn't know what it meant. And
The
it's
hairstyle.
Yeah, it's basically like a low bun. So we hear it twice in the book, so I'm going to give it 2 chignons.
I'm going to give this book 5 stars out of 5 because I love it so much. What, should I give it like 5 trees out of 5 or something like that?
Oh,
because
yeah, you can do whatever.
Yeah.
Or you give it 1 pond named Caroline. So sweet.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, whatever. It gets all the bales of cotton for me because I love this book. It was my 3rd time reading it, and I plan to read it more.
You could give it all 2,000 anchors.
That's right. That's right. That's
Not
right.
just 200.
I give it all 2,000 of Holland Grange's acres.
I think we've thoroughly discussed everything there is to think about in this book.
Oh, it's never true.
Never true, and it won't be. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us. It was such a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
Carolyn, as always, thank you.
Oh, yes. Always my pleasure.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Newbery Report. Our special guest today was Ashley Wilson. Join the conversation and tell us what you thought about the book on facebook.com/Newbery Report. That's NEWBERY Report. And at Newbery Report on Twitter. And never miss a show by making sure you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and all your favorite podcast apps. You can also find our show and some other terrific podcasts at www.racecarradio.com. The Newbery Report is hosted and recorded by me, Carrie Caston. My co-host is Carolyn Burns. It was edited by Austin Colon. Our executive producer is David Hoffman. The Newbery Report is a production of Race Car Radio. And join us next time for the 1978 winner, Bridge to Terabithia by Katherine Patterson.